What if the most powerful man in Russia was shaped not by ambition, but by a door no one else could see? A door with no number. A mirror with no reflection. A room no one ever admitted existed. In today's episode, we're diving into the shadows of East Germany, 1988, where young Vladimir Putin walked into a room and out of a reality no one could explain. Was it an experiment, a ritual, or something built to choose, not test, the next chapter of power? This story isn't about politics. It's about memory, silence, and the kind of loyalty that erases your name before history ever writes it down. Stay with us, because Room 39 was never on any map. But it was always part of the plan. The room beneath the map. In the deepest corridor of Zongnanhai, beneath layers of reinforced concrete and forgotten stairwells, there was a room so well hidden that even the architects who drafted its blueprint were sworn into silence. The entrance required no key, only a sequence of touches on what looked like an ordinary panel of wood. Once triggered, the wall slid back, not with the hiss of modern hydraulics, but with the reluctant groan of age. It had been 17 years since anyone last stood inside that room. The air was stale, heavy with silence, and yet expectant. Dust floated in shafts of artificial light, illuminating outlines of control panels, stacks of sealed files, and a curved table scarred by time and tense decisions. The walls were lined with ancient analog monitors, long disconnected but once used to track broadcasts from every province. General Liu stepped forward first. He wasn't the highest-ranking officer in the room, but his nervous energy made him the most animated. "Are we sure this is the place?" he asked, eyes darting from floor to ceiling. The last entry in the logs says it was sealed after Incident D-27. Minister Zhao, who had once chaired a forgotten department on media integrity, simply nodded. "Yes, this is the room." It was called the map room, not because it contained any maps, but because what was once spoken in this room redrew how the nation perceived itself. And once, just once, someone had spoken words so unfiltered, so unorthodox, that the party decided the best place for them was nowhere at all. That speaker was not yet president. He wasn't even the vice premier. In 2006, Xi Jinping was a provincial figure, known more for his name than his personal ideology. But those who were in the room remembered. And they remembered not just the man, but the voice, one that had laid out a future so radical, so eerily accurate in hindsight, that it terrified even the most loyal cadres. The purpose of today's meeting wasn't to discuss military budgets or foreign investments. It was to determine if the voice had left a trace. Colonel May tapped into a backup power generator. The monitors flickered, then dimmed. A symbol appeared, a red circle divided into quadrants, like a compass. The system was called Haoji. Few even remembered what it stood for, only that it was used briefly during the Cultural Repositioning Initiative of 2002. Minister Zhao opened a sealed folder. Inside were printed logs. Real paper. Real ink. "These are fragments," he said, placing the sheets on the table. "The stenographer was never found. The tapes were wiped. But our informant says fragments survived in the echo buffer." Echo buffer. Liu raised an eyebrow. Zhao explained, old state recording systems used analog-digital hybrids. Even after deletion, low-frequency imprints remained on some formats, like ghosts on magnetic tape. The others looked around, some skeptical, some deeply curious. General Liu leaned forward, reading from one of the printed fragments. "The people must be taught not who they are, but what they must become. Identity, like soil, must be cultivated, burnt, seeded, and harvested by the state." No one spoke. It wasn't the ideology that stunned them, it was the voice they could almost hear behind the words. Clinical. Convincing. Colonel May uploaded the log files into a data extraction module. They waited. Somewhere within the system, the remnants of a deleted speech were aligning, rebuilding, letter by letter, byte by byte. Then the screen lit up. Reconstruction in progress. 14% complete. General Liu exhaled sharply. "So it's true. he whispered. Minister Zhao didn't respond immediately. He simply stared at the monitor, lost in a thought he had buried for nearly 2 decades. Then he said something unexpected. Do you know what the most dangerous kind of speech is? No one answered. The one you can never prove existed. And in the silence that followed, the voice stirred again, not in sound, not yet, but in the careful alignment of data ghosts clawing their way back into history. The archivist who refused to forget. They used to call her the shadow recorder. Liang Shu was never meant to be in the room. She was a substitute stenographer, filling in for a colleague who had fallen ill the night before the infamous 2006 briefing. At just 24, fresh from the party's communications academy, she didn't yet understand the weight of the rooms she entered. Not fully, but what she lacked in seniority, she made up for in precision. Her transcriptions were immaculate, almost unervingly so. Some whispered that she could capture a man's soul in shorthand. What Liang didn't know, what no one told her, was that the words she was about to record that day weren't just for archival. They were never meant to be repeated. When Xi Jinping began to speak, the room grew colder. The lights remained the same, the walls unchanged, and yet, something shifted. Those present felt it in their spines, as if the air was listening too. He spoke of China's future not as a vision, but as an inevitability. He described not a government, but an algorithm. A future where control was not enforced, but chosen, freely, by those conditioned to do so. Liang typed everything. Every pause. Every deliberate shift in tone. Every time he lowered his voice, as if daring the room to lean in closer. She left that day with 2 copies, one official, stored in a sealed drive as protocol dictated, and one handwritten, hidden inside a hollowed-out mathematics textbook. A week later, the drive was gone. Officials came to her apartment. Her supervisor disappeared. She received a promotion and an unspoken warning. She was to never mention that meeting again. She obeyed. Outwardly. But every year on the same date, she would open that old textbook and read his words again, not out of nostalgia, but out of a growing unease. Because what had once sounded radical was slowly becoming reality. Cameras were not just watching, they were understanding. Citizens weren't just complying, they were anticipating. In 2014, after the implementation of the social credit system, she knew it was time to act. She copied the speech by hand. No scans, no photos. She sent it not to a journalist or a foreign entity, but to a retired codebreaker she'd met in a university lecture. His name was Kong Bao, and he had spent his life writing algorithms to detect hidden messages in radio broadcasts. This, she said when handing him the manuscript, was spoken once, then erased. But I need to know, is it still here? Kong Bao didn't ask questions. He read the first page and went silent for 2 full minutes. Then he looked up and said something she never forgot. This isn't a speech. It's an operating system. Together, they began decoding it, not for secret messages, but for patterns. The way certain phrases repeated. The sequencing of metaphors. Even the spacing of ideas followed a rhythm too precise to be accidental. They discovered that sections of Xi's speech corresponded to sections of existing propaganda modules that were released years later. Whole metaphors had been lifted. Terminologies had been softened, disguised, but the bones were the same. Then came the most chilling revelation. In the original manuscript, Liang had marked timestamps, how long she paused, which parts he emphasized. When they matched that rhythm against future televised addresses, they aligned. It was as if this single speech had become a blueprint, not just for policy, but for performance. By 2021, Bao's health was failing. Liang knew she would have to finish their work alone. She uploaded fragments of their findings into obscure literary databases, coded inside fictional poems and short stories. A few found their way into state-sponsored writing contests. She didn't want to be discovered, but she wanted someone to. Because she believed one truth, above all else. No matter how deeply you bury the past, it grows roots. The poems that spoke too clearly. By 2022, the whispers had grown louder. Some called it coincidence. Others called it subversion. But in a quiet corner of China's sprawling literary scene, a storm was quietly forming, inside stanzas and verses that were never meant to be read too literally. The first sign came in a slim poetry collection titled The Hills Remember in Silence, published under the pseudonym Lin Ziyu. On the surface, it was an ode to forgotten villages and aging rivers, filled with nostalgic laments and classical imagery. But for those who knew what to look for those who had seen Liang's manuscript, it was unmistakable. Lines lifted from the erased speech, rearranged and disguised within metaphor. The machine dreams not of freedom, but of obedience made beautiful. We do not silence the past, we transcribe it into loyalty. To most readers, these were nothing more than lyrical abstractions. But to Kong Bao, who had spent his final months decoding that forgotten speech, they were flags, triggers, anchors pointing back to something forbidden. The poems began circulating online, especially within closed academic forums and AI research circles. A user named Shujin47 started a thread that dissected the poems line by line, showing how their rhythm mirrored a lost structure, the same pattern from Xi's ghost speech. A pattern of rhetorical sequencing that emphasized inevitability over ideology. Not why, but what must be. And that's when the takedowns began. Entire websites vanished. Forum threads deleted mid-discussion. One researcher posted a video breaking down the poem's allusions to social credit metrics. Within hours, his account was locked and flagged for digital instability. People began asking, who is Lin Ziyu? The truth. Lin Ziyu never existed. The name was a composite, derived from the surnames of three now-deceased historians who had once questioned the direction of Chinese information policy. But the publisher of the collection was very real. A state-run arts foundation based in Chengdu. The same foundation that, coincidentally, had hosted a writing residency in 2016. The same year Liang Shu vanished from public view. When a curious graduate student at Peking University, Mei Han, began researching the publication trail, she found something even more puzzling. The editor who greenlit The Hills Remember in Silence had no other publishing credits. No past. No present. No records at all. Mei did what many wouldn't dare. She wrote her thesis on the poem's unconscious ideological motifs. She didn't accuse. She didn't speculate. She simply analyzed. 3 weeks before her thesis defense, she received a call from an unfamiliar number. The voice on the other end was soft, deliberate. Burn your draft. Replace the last section. We're not erasing history. We're uploading it. Then the line went dead. Shaken, Mei changed her conclusion. She passed with honors. But she kept the original thesis, saved offline, printed and sealed inside a red envelope. She mailed it to her cousin in Vancouver with no return address. What none of them knew, Liang, Kong, Mei, was that these poems weren't just spreading in print. They were training data. The state's language models had ingested thousands of such fragments, lines so ambiguous they passed censors, yet carried embedded meaning. And so, Xi's lost speech, erased from every drive, every archive, began bleeding into the machine's memory. Not through tapes, not through recordings, but through metaphor, through verse, through the subtle weapon of poetic pattern. As if the algorithm itself couldn't forget. The one who watched from the shadows. Nobody really noticed the man in the hallway. That's how he liked it. He was always there, in the corridors of Zongnanhai, in the shadow of meetings, always just outside the camera frame. His name was Ran Kelly. To many, he was just another mid-level aide with a clipboard. But Ran had watched every rise and fall in the party since 1989. Not as a player, as a recorder. He never spoke unless spoken to, never made suggestions, never tried to be more than the furniture around him. But inside, he had built a private archive, not just documents, but behaviors, alliances, betrayals. Xi Jinping had seen him only a few times up close. The first time, he mistook him for a janitor. The second time, he noticed Ren was always the last to leave every meeting. The third time, during a late-night policy session in 2013, she asked who he was. "Observer," Ren said. "Nothing more." The answer made Xi pause. He'd been trained to distrust those who claimed to be invisible. Over the years, Ren witnessed every mysterious dismissal. He logged the time when Lu Yong vanished, not the exact hour, but the moment his phone went dead. He marked a note when He Weijian's driver began showing up to meetings without him, and when the tea tray arrived without a cup for Minister Fang. Ren understood that meant goodbye. And yet, Ren stayed. In 2020, he began noticing something new. Files disappearing. Not from his archive, from the official party database. Entries on past purges were being rewritten. Entire speeches reattributed. The digital footprint of certain men and women wiped clean. He didn't panic. He printed thousands of pages, then microfiled them, then sent copies abroad under pseudonyms. He was no longer just observing. One rainy night in March 2022, a junior aide handed Ren a USB stick. "For you. They said you'd understand." Inside were documents detailing a secret meeting she had attended in a location only referred to as Room Q. Attendees included a general long believed dead, a banker blacklisted since 2015, and a translator from the Ministry of State Security. There was no transcript. Only one sentence, typed on an internal memo. "They have seen the map. We proceed." Ren didn't sleep that night. He just watched the walls of his apartment, thinking about what that could mean. Maps meant plans. Plans meant structure. Structure meant inevitability. But whose map? And what was she planning to redraw? The last footprint left. It was a foggy morning in Beijing, one of those days when the city feels like it's holding its breath. A junior archivist named Mei Lin walked into the restricted wing of the Central Archives. Her clearance was temporary, a favor from a senior official who owed her father something from years ago. She wasn't supposed to be in the X-Files section. Nobody was. But curiosity doesn't ask for permission. The drawer she opened was labeled July 2006. Inside, a collection of transcripts, some on yellowing paper, others digitized onto old CDs. She found what she hadn't known she was looking for, a record of a speech never made public. It was marked Directive, suppressed, by order of Z9. Mei Lin, heart pounding, inserted the disc into the dusty terminal nearby. What played was fragmented audio, heavily distorted, but some lines broke through like cracks in concrete. "History is not kind to those who win too quietly. We will not whisper our future. We will write it with thunder." She froze. The voice. It was unmistakably Xi Jinping. But not the polished, careful version from CCTV broadcasts. This was younger. Harsher. Hungry. Before she could process what she heard, the screen went black. The system shut itself down. No logs. No beeps. Only silence. Within 10 minutes, 2 plainclothes officers arrived at the archive entrance. No words were exchanged. Mei Lin left the building. She never returned. But she had copied the audio onto a portable recorder in her bag, an old trick her journalism professor had once taught her, just in case history shows up uninvited. A week later, in Buenos Aires, a low-profile podcast channel called The Red Tape uploaded a cryptic file titled The Voice That Was Never Recorded. The file lasted only 4 hours before disappearing. But thousands heard it. Some saved it. In underground forums, debates raged. Was it real? Was it AI-generated propaganda? A psyop? And then, someone matched the background hum in the audio to a location deep beneath a military base in the Ningxia region. a rumored data fortress called the Well. The ripple had begun. Not a revolution, not a coup, but something slower, deeper, a question embedded into the future. What happens when the past you buried refuses to stay dead? Xi never addressed the leak publicly, but those closest to him said his demeanor changed. He started avoiding unscripted interactions. He stopped using certain meeting rooms. He rewrote a key paragraph in the party constitution about recording for the benefit of future generations. And perhaps most tellingly, he ordered all internal surveillance audio systems to be replaced with new ones, silent, decentralized, without human access logs. Some say it was about security. Others say it was because he knew the next voice to vanish might be his own. What if Room 39 wasn't a place, but a moment? A moment when choice is replaced with choreography. When power doesn't rise, it's selected. Putin walked into that door as a soldier. He walked out as a shadow of something larger. And maybe that's the point. True influence isn't loud. It's invisible. If you found this story as gripping as we did, make sure to subscribe, like, and share it with someone who loves unraveling the untold. And remember, what's left out of history books often explains the most.